Sometimes a case comes along that surprises you, not because of flashy branding or wild features, but because it just gets stuff right. Today, we're diving into a mid-tower PC case that isn't from one of the big names, but still manages to stand out in a crowded market. Meet the Endorfy ARX 700 ARGB. It's big, bold, and built with the kind of details that might just make you rethink what you're looking for in your next PC case. But don't let its size or unfamiliar name fool you. There's a lot to like here, from a design that simplifies the build process to cooling and sound performance that rivals some of the best. The ARX 700 has more going for it than you might expect. Of course, no case is perfect, and there is one build quality concern I'll point out later in the video, but here's what's on the agenda. I'll take you on a tour of the features and design, install my standard test system to put it to the test, and as always, share my build notes and performance results. We'll find out if Endorfy has what it takes to earn a spot on your shortlist for mid-tower cases. Let's get started. The Endorfy ARX 700 is only slightly on the larger size for a mid-tower ATX case, measuring 288mm wide, 472mm deep, and 486mm tall. It's compatible with mini ATX, micro ATX, ATX, and some eATX boards up to 11 inches wide. You can fit graphics cards up to 410mm long, tower air coolers up to 179mm high, and ATX power supplies up to 340mm long. This case packs four 140mm PWM ARGB fans right out of the box, 3 up front for intake and 1 in the back for exhaust. The top of the case can hold either 3 120 or 2 140mm fans, and the bottom can hold another 120mm fan, redirecting airflow from the lower front fan up into the graphics cards. In all, you can load up to 8 fans in this case, and for the liquid cooling crowd, you can install a 360mm radiator up top or in the front. The front fans are mounted to removable rails, keeping the fans outside the case behind the front panel. An AIO or radiator can also be mounted to these rails, both making installation easier, but also limiting the space taken up inside the case. To manage the fans, Endorfy included a 5-header fan and RGB hub. The case is airflow focused, utilizing a large steel mesh front panel, and opposed to the cheap plastic magnetic filters you typically see in this classic case, the top panel is also the same easily removable mesh steel. The ARX 700 also has the largest SSD capacity of any mid-tower case I've tested. There are two 2.5-inch SSD mounting points inside the case on top of the bottom shroud cover, as well as 2 fixed and 1 adjustable SSD mounting behind the motherboard tray, with the adjustable point at the front side of the case providing the option to install the SSD on the left or right side of the panel. And finally, there's a mounting point in the bottom of the case which can hold either one 3.5-inch hard drive or one 2.5-inch SSD. Ultimately, the case can hold 6 SSDs or 5 SSDs in one hard drive. For front I/O, located at the top right side of the case, you've got power and reset buttons, which the reset button comes pre-wired to the RGB hub for lighting mode selection, separate 3.5mm headphone and microphone jacks, 2 5GB per second Type A ports, and a 10GB per second USB Type C port. At the time of filming, the Endorfy ARX 700 is retailing for about $124 US, but you can check the link in the description below for current pricing and availability. When it comes to build quality, the Endorfy ARX 700 borrows from its European roots, standing apart from many of the budget cases with its construction. The chassis is made from a sturdy 1mm steel, which is a notable upgrade over the thinner 22-gauge steel often used in lower-cost Chinese cases. The side panel is a hefty 4mm slightly tinted tempered glass, secured with solid steel thumb screws. Overall, the case feels robust and well made, but as always, there are room for improvement. Let's start with the tempered glass panel. It's only secured by the front tabs and the thumb screws, which means you'll want to be extra careful when removing it. Once those front tabs slide out of their slots, the panel can fall right off the case, so keep a hand on it to avoid any catastrophic crashes. The bigger concern though lies with the front panel assembly. It features a panel in frame design where the inner mesh panel is magnetically attached to the plastic frame for easy cleaning. While convenient in theory, the plastic used for the frame is thin and feels flimsy. When I first removed the front panel, I genuinely thought I broke it. I'm used to the front panels being firmly attached, so when I grabbed it and gave it a solid yank, I was sure I ripped the fastening pegs clean off. Thankfully it survived, but the plastic's thinness is definitely noticeable. This design choice leads to an even bigger issue: rattle. The inner mesh panel tends to vibrate when the fans hit speeds of around 800 to 900 RPM. At first, I thought a rogue cable was brushing against one of my fan blades, and I tore the case apart looking for the culprit. Turns out it was just the mesh panel rattling. The resonance quiets down once the fans ramp up to about 1000 RPM and over, but it's an issue nonetheless. Now, I was able to DIY a fix by sticking a few thin foam pads between the frame and the panel, which eliminated the fan resonance, but the panel still has a slight rattle. From a manufacturing perspective, the solution here is simple: heavier plastic, some silicone pads, and doubling the number of magnets securing the panel. That would go a long way in addressing these problems and elevating the overall build quality of the case. Now, let's dive into the build experience, and honestly, it's all good news here. The Endorfy ARX 700 offers plenty of space to work with, making it a dream to build in. A standard ATX motherboard fits comfortably with grommeted cable pass-throughs strategically placed on all sides for clean and easy routing. Thanks to the extra row of standoff mounting points, this case can also handle eATX boards up to 11 inches wide, giving you flexibility for larger builds. My 160mm tower cooler practically disappeared inside this spacious case. While the ARX 700 doesn't have the longest GPU clearance of all cases on the market, it still supports the biggest graphics cards currently available. Bonus points for the dedicated grommeted pass-through for the PCIe power cables. It's a small touch, but it makes a big difference in keeping things tidy. For cooling, there's plenty of room for a top-mounted AIO, so you won't run into heatsink or RAM clearance issues. The specs list a maximum PSU length of 330mm, but that's assuming you're not using the bottom fan or storage drives. With a bottom fan installed, like in my build, a 220mm power supply is about the longest you can fit comfortably. One feature I really appreciated was the pre-wired fans. It saved a lot of time during cable management, and I was able to plug the bottom fan into the open header with no fuss. This hub also allows for simple RGB selection using the reset button to cycle through common lighting colors and patterns without the need to install some horrible RGB software. Back to cable management, this case makes it ridiculously easy. There's plenty of space behind the right panel, several Velcro straps, and loads of tie-down points. I had everything neatly secured in under 5 minutes without needing to cram extra cables under the PSU shroud. This keeps the bottom fan clear of obstructions and airflow uninterrupted. Once all the panels were slapped back on, it was time to put this case to the test. With my standard test system installed, the full specs are in the description below, I ran the ARX 700 through its paces to see how it stacks up against the same setup on an open-air test bench. Using AIDA64 for CPU stress tests and 20-minute Port Royal loops for the GPU, the results were good, not mind-blowing, but solid. Here's how it performed. Inside the case, CPU temps dropped by 2 degrees Celsius compared to the open air setup, and my motherboard temps did even better, dropping by 4.5 degrees. During the GPU stress test, temps dipped by 1 degree Celsius inside the case. Now, anytime temps inside a case beat an open air test bench, you know the case is pulling its weight in the airflow department. While these results are pretty average for an airflow focused design, the ARX 700 really shines in how quietly it does the job. At full load, noise levels topped out at just 47.6 dBA. a number worth some attention. For reference, my studio's ambient noise level sits at about 42.5 dBA, which is only about 5 decibels lower. But here's the thing, sound levels don't work like you might think. They're logarithmic, not linear. That means you can't just subtract the background noise level of 42.5 from the case's 47.6 dBA and call it 5.1 dBA of isolated noise. That's not how it works. The actual calculation looks something like this. And that's how I arrive at the 47.6 dBA isolated noise level for the case. Why is this important? Well, because the difference in perceived noise is also logarithmic. For example, the last case I reviewed, the Cypress 7, had a peak noise level of 58 dBA. You might think that's only about 21% louder than 47.6 dBA, but in reality, the Cypress 7's noise level is calculated to be 10.96 times more intense than the ARX 700. That's not quite the full story, however. While that's the math, the human ear perceives things differently. A 10x increase in sound intensity is perceived at about twice as loud, so the Cypress 7's 58 dBA sound is just over twice as loud as the ARX 700's 47.6 dBA, according to the A-weighted decibel scale, which accounts how humans actually hear. So here's the TLDR on sound. Every 10 dBA increase equals a 10x intensity boost and is perceived as being twice as loud. This is why I always show the total noise level, tell you the isolated source level, and show the ambient level so you can check my math and get the full picture. Thanks for attending my TED Talk. Now, let's wrap up the thermal and noise testing. The Endorfy ARX 700 earns the crown for the best thermal to noise performance ratio of any case I've tested so far. This is largely thanks to its use of lower RPM 140mm fans. These larger fans can move more air while spinning slower, which keeps noise levels impressively low. However, there's a trade-off. 140mm fans typically have less static pressure, which makes it harder for them to pull the air in through the mesh panel. This explains why the thermals, while good, aren't quite as exceptional as you might expect from a case with this design and volume. That said, Endorfy did do a great job optimizing the mesh panel surface area. They even added small mesh sections on the sides of the frame and nearly eliminated all the gaps around the fans. This clever design prevents the fans from recirculating warm air from inside the case, as airflow will always follow the path of least resistance. It's these small details that make a big difference in overall performance. Another win for 140mm fans is the lower tone they produce. While their RPM is lower, the larger blades create a deeper sound profile, which is typically perceived as quieter to the human ear, even if the decibel meter doesn't tell the full story. Endorfy clearly put some thought into balancing airflow, acoustics, and design, making the ARX 700 a top contender for silent, efficient cooling. So, overall, the Endorfy ARX 700 impressed me with its thermal performance, whisper quiet operation, and thoughtful design, but as always, no case is perfect. The one hiccup is that loose fitting front panel, and while it's an easy DIY fix, having to tweak a case that's so clearly designed with silence in mind feels a little counterintuitive. Another potential sticking point is the design. Personally, I'm all for this clean, minimalist look of that mesh front rectangle. It's simple, functional, and timeless, but for some buyers, it might come across as a bit plain or even dated. When you stack it up against competitors like the Fractal North, which offer a modern aesthetic without sacrificing cooling or sound performance, and has recently dropped to a competitive price point, the ARX 700's utilitarian look might not be for everyone. That said, if you prioritize function over flash, this case delivers in spades. The airflow focused design, spacious interior, and those low RPM 140mm fans make it a fantastic option for anyone looking to build a quiet, high performance PC at around $124 US or slightly cheaper for the non-RGB version. It's a solid deal for what you get, but just maybe keep a little foam tape handy just in case. Thanks for watching. If you found this review helpful or at least entertaining, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more PC case reviews, tech builds, and all things hardware. Got questions? Drop them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer, and I'll see you in the next one.